Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I'm your hostess, Shamisa Ali. Tonight, we will speak to a woman who has taken our education standards to a different level in Guyana. But first, today is an historic day for Guyana and the Caribbean. It is the launch of CARICOM Agri Investment Forum and Expo. The Guyana Dialogue is sponsored by Coordinating Council of Guyanese based in the UK, Canada, the Caribbean, and Guyana. Our program tonight is moderated by former UG lecturer Dr. Tara Singh and educator Strad Kubal. Our topic tonight is education accomplishment and challenges for emerging economies. Tasked with the tremendous responsibility of educating Guyana's children, her hands on approach to management is exactly what the system now requires. Although she does not profess to know all the answers, she is tough but fair. She first came onto the political scene in 2006 as a young minister. While in charge of human services, she piloted several critical bills that were passed in the National Assembly and enacted in law. She is a wife, mom, attorney, and the Minister of Education. Please welcome the Honorable Priya Manickchand. Welcome to the show, Minister Manickchand. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad to be here tonight. So
Well, Dr.
to all
Tara
three of you,
is here,
I've
and
seen
this.
your programs. I like them. I like the searching questions and the unhesitating inquiry into our political system and the developmental work that's happening here. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. We are happy to have you. And Dr. Tara will go ahead and start off with.
Welcome, welcome, Honorable Minister of Education. Nice to see you. Um, I'm not going to ask any question at this stage, but there.
So I'm not hearing you as clearly as I'd like to. I'm not sure if that's because you are speaking softly or um, if I am not hearing you clearly.
Well, she was here. Are you hearing me clearly,
I'm
Minister
hearing you
Manickchand?
clearly, Shamiz. I'm not hearing Dr. Taro clearly.
Okay.
Can you hear me too? She probably can't hear
Can
me
you hear
either.
Mr. Kubal?
Faintly. I heard a murmur, but I can't hear the words. So it might be
Well,
a mic issue.
can you hear me now?
Yes, that's I can hear you enough to
Can you hear me?
yes.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. I can.
Yes, you
Okay.
can.
Okay.
All right. I noticed that in the 2022 budget, you got an increase of 22.6% over the 2021 allocation, which makes your ministry having the highest allocation of all the sectors in Guyana, $74.4 billion, which account for about 13 or 40% of the national budget. So that's a tremendous emphasis which the government puts on education in this social economic transformation of Guyana. Now, I would like if you can start off to tell us a little the major themes of the education strategy plan, which you have from 2020, 2020 2024 or something like that. If you can highlight the main themes, and then we'll ask follow-up questions from that.
Yeah, so we are very keen, and we have always been very keen on making sure we don't only say education is important, but that we fund it appropriately. If you look historically, I mean, I don't want to go back too far, but if you look historically at how the PPP has funded education, it has always been around 15 to 17% of the budget, and that's very different from how the PNC used to fund budget education. Very small. So I'm not talking about the size of the budget. I'm talking about the percentage that was allocated to education. They used to be, I think their maximum was about 7%. But historically, we have always allocated a large percentage of the country's spending on education. The sector plan, which we launched and commissioned just somewhere around 2021, is one that says where we need to be in the next 4 or 5 years, where we're going. And it has broad themes of access, quality, uh, equity, efficiency, and lifelong learning. How are we going to build out those broad concepts? Access, very simply, can children access primary, secondary, nursery? So Guyana achieved universal primary education, one of the MDGs, quite a while back, sometime in the 2000s. We don't have universal nursery education. Nursery education in Guyana is not compulsory. And we are working feverishly. In fact, one of our promises was that we would get to secondary, universal secondary education this first term. So that's something we're working on really, really proactively. That's a very expensive enterprise because, as you can imagine, the places that we do not have universal coverage for us yet are deep hinterland villages, and those are very complex villages because secondary education should really only begin with at least 250 students, and none of the villages have that amount, so they're all boarding schools or dormitory schools, and it's very, very expensive. And population growths are uh, could be a little challenging when we're deciding whether to put down a school or not. But there we believe we can get to a place of 100% access in the next 4 to 5 years. So that's access. Quality is the entire world has moved towards, the conversation has moved from access to quality. Now that we have schools and we have benches and desks for children to sit at, how do we make sure the learning and the teaching is actually of high quality so that we could produce a better rounded student? That would involve, the use of technology, better and more trained teachers, um, infusing or paying attention to the very relevant topics in the world. Just the quality that is delivered in the classroom. Using technology is fairly obvious, and lifelong learning. How do we make sure we could skill and reskill as needs change in the country, and as people's requirements for their own learning, regardless of age, change with those needs.
Um, Speaking about teachers training, I noticed in one of the reports coming out from the Ministry of Education that only about 73% of the teachers are trained. And it has been indicated there by 2024, you want all teachers to be trained by then. And I think you'll issue a circular to that effect, or if you can clarify
So
or
what this
elaborate on
is,
that.
again, let me give you the historical background of this. When we came into office in 1992, Shamiza was probably a girl then, as was I. We had about 30% of our teachers trained, which is a very small number. That means out of every 100 teachers in the system, only 30 were trained teachers, people who went to school and not only had content, but who learned to teach. So the educator on your panel would understand the importance of that, as I'm sure with all of you. We moved that up through a whole host of measures, including introducing a degree, an associate degree at the training college, working with UG to do that, changing the curriculum, allowing in-service and pre-service teachers. And we moved that up for the last 15 or so years. We've had a pretty constant 70, 75, fluctuates depending on migration rates or people retiring and so on, train teachers in the system. We're not going to be able to change that except we can change intake in the college. So I'm very, very happy to see when everywhere else had closed their teacher training colleges in 2020 and 2021 because of COVID. And I actually met a closed college when we came into office in August 2020. We went fully online. So by 2021, we were fully online at the college, not solely. We're not transferring from a face-to-face instruction at the training college to go solely online. So we will still have person-to-person instruction, but we went fully. All our courses are online. We were able to move intake from, at its highest, 535 persons to 2,800 people applying last year. 28. That's almost a 5-time improvement. This year we're now getting applications in, and we're going through them. We have 400 to 600 applications that we're going through. So I say that to say, many people say sometimes, oh, that's ambitious, you're never going to get to 100%. I absolutely believe we can. We have this thing is not magic. It requires the will to make sure that there are 100% trained teachers in the classroom, and then the funding for it. And we have committed to both. We also issued in the system right now are teachers who have been teaching, who have not been trained to teach. So we have several categories. We have the teacher who is qualified to enter the college. So we have mandated that they enter, because we believe we'll get a better product teacher from if they are trained to teach. And we have persons who are teaching who unfortunately are not eligible for entry into the college, so they have to do an upgrading course. And yes, we did make a mandate that and issue a circular to say that all teachers who are in the system must get trained, or their jobs can be in jeopardy. And while that may sound harsh, at the end of the day, we have to do what's in the best interest of the children we swore to serve. And you're more likely to get a better product from a teacher who has been trained than a teacher who has not been trained. Now, I say that with the greatest of respect, because I am fully aware that untrained teachers have given great service to this country also, and have seen have really contributed to the development of our young people. But we believe that we have to take this up a notch and make sure we train the people who are going to be teaching our children.
Well said.
So we'll see by 2024, 100% of our teachers trained or in training. We're also going to see a larger complement of teachers. So we're going to have more teachers in the classroom. That will help us achieve our sector plan promise or aim of equity, as well as our manifesto promise of equity. One of the things that Guyana has struggled with for a long time is taking the same service that is offered on the coast into the hinterland. And we have a whole set of reasons about why we have been unable to do that. Teachers not being in the hinterland, and then it's chicken and egg. If there are no trained teachers there, then the product you keep producing in students result in students who are not eligible for this training, and it could be very messy. We believe while we produce children who are eligible for training, we could send in teachers from the coastland to do that. And so we're aggressively and actively looking right now at housing in the hinterland for teachers, and how we could better offer incentives to persons who are from the coast that want to give service in the hinterland riverine areas.
I want to follow up with this question. Now, it's laudable that you're going to aim with 100% by 2024, but historically, the teaching profession has been bogged down, or they suffer high rates of attrition. Do you have any kind of incentive plan for the teachers to minimize or mitigate this attrition level? I know attrition level is very low now, but it needs to come down a bit lower. It's just not
Right.
good.
So that's not the
Trained teachers
reality.
tend to leave. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. Sorry, you're still very low, so I'm not hearing you clearly. And I actually hope your audience is hearing clearly, because these are good questions. We don't have, as a reality right now, any mass exodus. There was a period where a lot of our teachers went off to Africa. There was an actual recruitment drive, active and organized, not just we don't like Guyana anymore, we want to get away. It was actually very organized. Botswana, the Bahamas. Today I was speaking with the Deputy Prime Minister of the Bahamas, and I was saying to him he must be very familiar with our ways, because so many of our teachers have gone to the Bahamas and given excellent service there. We had Canada actively, procuring in an organized way, procuring teachers for their country. That is not happening now. So we're not seeing any large exodus, and definitely not in an organized way. There are people who leave, but and when you live in the global village we live in, it's going to be hard to tell people they can't move on. A lot of people have relatives away. People are spreading their wings. What we are seeing now are teachers coming back in. Quite a number of teachers broke their contract, and I say that without any judgment. When you train here, you're contracted to the government, and a lot of teachers who left didn't fulfill that contract, pay off, and so on that they'd have to do if they're leaving before time. And that's how I know people are coming back, because we're getting requests to waive the penalty that they incurred when they left. So I know that some people are coming back. So I don't think it's a big the issue that it once was for the country.
Now, going back to the education strategy 2020 to 2025, you mentioned two important principles: access and equality. Would you say that the gold scholarships that you and the Public Service Ministry offered last year, 6,000 and the 4,500, is part of that philosophy, equality and access, or
So
how you
the
explain that?
scholarships we're offering on the goal are scholarships for tertiary and after high school education, post high school. So there's courses with renowned universities that have open schools across the world. This year we're working with 13 universities, and we offer certificates, degrees, master's programs, and PhDs. And I say we loosely. Goal is just the medium, but it's the university that is offering these courses, and the person has to be eligible to enter that university, and they engage with the university entirely. What we do is make it easy for them, and then the government pays for that, so they don't have to pay the university. What we saw was an amazing appetite for extra and further studies. So when we made the promise in our campaign, we said, we train 20,000 persons online. Within the first year of getting into office, we had to fend off and put on ice for this year some of the scholarships. So last year, when it should have been about 4,000, we actually paid for and enrolled 6,000 persons. This year, again, we will have persons lined up and waiting, and we suspect this year is going to be very similar amount. So we're now moved to saying at least 20,000. I don't think we'll stop at 20,000. And it is offered to persons regardless of ethnicity, religion, gender, geographical location, age. Um, and because it's such a wide variety of and range of courses, you could have the highest uh, qualification. You could have a master's and move on to a PhD, or you could have zero qualifications and do certificate skills courses. We are not. There is one small drawback that that is affecting persons
One of the,
not
sorry,
if they
go ahead.
have no connectivity to the internet. They will have some trouble engaging with uh, these courses, because you have to have internet, while not every day, all day, at some point to be able to send off assignments and download your work. They are fully online courses.
One of the concerns that many people have expressed, especially teachers, they're worried about pupil-teacher ratio. I know, I think the last
I
year
am not sure. I
we had
see
about
I see you
86,000
speaking, but I
teachers
can't hear
and
anything you
staff,
say.
students.
Wait, she can hear you. She's saying she can hear you.
Go ahead.
Do you want to? Where's yours?
You can
Do
hear.
you want to ask a question while we?
Okay.
No, obviously. Can you hear me, Madam
Hmm.
Minister?
Uh, can you hear?
Gosh.
Um,
Can you hear me?
Yes, say again.
Madam Minister, can you hear me? She doesn't seem to.
Let me see if this might be
Can you
me.
hear
I
me?
had a call coming
Minister
in just now,
Manickchand,
so
can
I
you
don't know
hear
if it
me?
bounced my
Can
mic
you
off, but I'm not hearing you.
can you hear me?
All right. So while we figure out Minister Manickchand, her connection, or if it's just the audio that's not working for her right now, any comments right now,
Um,
Dr. Tara?
Well, I was going to ask her about
Okay.
the student-pupil ratio because that is very
uh,
important.
uh, sorry, I can't hear anything.
Hearing?
I'm not sure
Can
what's
you hear
happening.
me, Madam Minister? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
It doesn't. He doesn't. It
How
doesn't sound.
about, can you hear me?
No.
No. All right. So you were saying, Dr. Tara?
Yeah, this pupil teacher, because I know there are about 85, 86,000 students in the public school system in Guyana, and there are about 11 or 12,000 teachers, probably more.
Right.
And they
So
will,
if you can hear me,
We can hear
We
you.
can hear
yes,
I
you.
can't hear you still.
Wow.
Are you hearing me? So these are some
Yeah,
of the
we hear you
challenges
loud
we've
and
had
clear.
with
uh,
the
can you please
beautiful
comment on the student-pupil
invention of being able
ratio?
to communicate, especially on mass, the large numbers of persons, these kinds of connectivity issues. I can't hear anything from your end. So here, I'm gonna leave and try to come back into the meeting. In the meanwhile, you could talk about how lovely Guyana is.
Cannot achieve academically. Yeah, my question is simple. I would like the minister to elaborate on programs and activities that the education ministry are involved in to enhance the education of children who cannot achieve, let's say, the tertiary education, but they can rely on vocational and technical skills to enhance, let's say, the personal life.
Okay.
Great. So
Minister
I'm hearing you.
Manickchand, can you hear me?
I am hearing you now. Yes,
Perfect. Can we do
Can
a
you hear
check?
me?
I'm hearing you. Actually, I'm hearing you clearer than before.
Wow.
Perfect. Well, we are happy that you're back, as I was starting to feel a little bit confused and, frustrated there, but I'm happy you are back and we have questions for you. So I'll let Dr. Tara go ahead.
I just have a quick question I pass you on to Kubi. He's from your area, Maikoni, Koblal, Maikoni Creek. I think he
Good
knows
man,
your
then.
dad. He knows your dad well. My question is, are you comfortable with this student-teacher ratio now in schools?
So for the most part, we have what has been something we were aiming for, which is about 20 to 1 at nursery, 28 to 1 at primary, and 30 to 35 to 1 at secondary. However, the smaller the student teacher ratio, the smaller the number of students, the each teacher, the more effective we think we can be. And that is why we believe that putting more teachers, not just more trained teachers, but more, actually quantitatively more teachers into the system would help us to do things like having assistant teachers and so on in classrooms. So you asked me if I am comfortable. No, I would answer it this way. Comparatively speaking, from where we came, I am pleased that we are where we are, but I'm not happy that, or I don't believe that we can change this for the better. So I'm not comfortable, and we are going. This is why we're making efforts to bring that down a little bit, because the research is clear. The smaller number of students a teacher has to deal with, the more likely it is that teacher is effective.
Thank you. And I pass you to Koblal. He wants to ask you a question.
Madam Minister, I look at you as one of somebody who is very close to us. Actually, your dad and I grew up together. We started.
Did you teach too in
Yeah,
Maikoni?
we started teaching together. but
Ah,
he
yeah.
was only fortunate to leave the profession, and I stuck to it. And apart from that, your mom and I went to high school. We were in the same
Wow.
class,
Wow.
and my wife is her dad's neighbor, and she and your mom graduated the same year from Surrey Potter. So we
Oh,
have a
very
lot,
nice.
relationship together. Although we never met, I know the family very well.
My
My
mom's
simple question.
entire, all her sisters were teachers, most of them, also, and her uncles, and she comes from a long
Well, I know she
history of
came from a
teaching.
background of education. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
My simple question is, I noticed you mentioned the gold program for students going to tertiary education. I am really concerned about students in Guyana who cannot, let's say, complete high school. I noticed you've recently enhanced the program to make those who have not achieved, let's say, a GD program or a GC or a CSEC qualification or certification. You are trying to get them there. I'm more concerned about students who can be trained vocationally to be, let's say, mechanics, plumbers, welders, technician, refrigerator technician, and things like that. Can you elaborate about the ministry program for those students who cannot really achieve tertiary education?
So we're not talking about it like that anymore, but I do understand what you mean and what you're saying. So the Ministry of Edu, I should say, the government of Guyana, particularly the PPPC government of Guyana, has a very keen interest in making sure, or we have a very skilled and trained population, and so we a lot of emphasis is placed on the TVET type education that you're talking about, the skills training. We have TVET institutions in Region 2, Region 3. Region 3 was built out under the Jagdeo administration. Um, Region 4, Region 5, Region 6, Region 10. And we're looking at doing even more. Region 5 was also a Bar Jagdeo product. The recently last week we announced the rebuilding of GTI. That's the premier TVET institution. Now, the reason I said we're not talking about it like that, this skills training is very marketable, as you know. In fact, I want to be a mason. Um, it is very useful, and it really creates a lot of productivity. But what we have is a little bit of a stigma attached to it. Well, that used to be attached to it that we're trying to reverse right now. If you can't do academics, then you should go into skills training. In my time at school, that's kind of what we thought. If you had a T square in your hand, you weren't too good at academics, and that's no longer true. Now people are choosing to upskill rather than get the degrees and PhDs and so on, and both have value. But we are building out a we want to build out a skilled population that comes to the lifelong learning that I was talking about earlier. We also have, with the new oil and gas economy that's going to be upon us, a great need for those kinds of skills. And so there's a whole relook at what we're offering, how we can do that effectively and efficiently, um, and how we could produce students who are not only certified here but are marketable and can take their skills to the Caribbean countries, to other countries. So we're actually moving to CVQ. I'm not sure if you know the CVQ levels. We're trying to move all our institutions, even high schools, to a place where we are certifiable. And we're not just doing this for fun. We're not just doing this as a pastime. We're not just doing this as a hobby. The students, this new program, Grow, that we launched yesterday, is aimed at attracting or giving a second chance to persons who left high school completely, either having written and not been successful at the CXC, GC exit level, or who left before they even tried the exams. Unfortunately, even for the skill center, because we're not just doing this as a, well, you couldn't make it in high school, we're going to take you in here. Even those TVET institutions need to have eligibility criteria, and so a lot of it will a lot of people who go there will need to get some kind of upgrading in their academics, and that's why we launched. And I'm very, very, very happy to say that since we launched, we've seen over 1,000 applications, and it hasn't been 24 hours as yet. I mean, I think it's just over 24 hours, um, and a whole set more being processed. So clearly, people see the need for this. Of course, we don't believe we are really trying very hard to make sure we reduce the number of persons leaving school without some kind of certification. We also want to redefine what successful school leaving is. Is it only a CXE certificate with 12 subjects? Is that the way we're defining matriculation? Because if it is, then we're not catering, and it is right now, we're not catering for the kind of Guyana that we believe will be upon us in a few short years. And so that is getting a revision in the ministry also, and we'll announce it shortly.
I believe that the Minister of Finance in his budget presentation indicated that there are about 4,500 students enrolled in technical and vocational education.
Yeah.
And as we are in a bit of a curriculum discussion here, someone asked me to
That's
ask
per
you
year.
whether you plan to introduce cricket into school cricket competition and football as part of the curriculum.
So it's funny that you asked that. FIFA, the World FIFA Federation, and the Guyana Football Federation just signed on with us to do football for schools. They're calling it F4S, and it's FIFA stamped and FIFA trained. And that's going to be a rollout across schools in all 10 regions. Not every school, but initially quite a number of schools where football is going to be an active part of the school. It's very nicely done. It's not just football on the field, kicking balls and whatever else you do with a football in that sport, but also teaching some of the things that ought to come with team sports. And so there's a special curriculum for that everybody who partakes in this will have these skills when they leave, softer skills, if you will. The Guyana Cricket Board is also currently engaged with us to train teachers, initially 120 teachers, and I think a similar number of students. And this is a West Indies Cricket Board activity. And so, again, while it won't be for every school, the initial starting is happening here. Now, let me tell you how that fits into what we want to do. We want to make sure we stay at the top academically because, we're topping the Caribbean in almost every area in education. The overall best student, as well as individual areas, sciences, humanities, business, TVET. I think the only thing we've never really topped in was art, like actual art, visual arts, but we've been topping consistently in the other subjects. But we also want to make sure that every student who exits our system has 5 qualities. One, a second language. Two, another language outside of Guyana. Two, an instrument, that they're competent in an instrument, so it could be any instrument. Three, a sport. Four, some level of volunteerism has been infused into their consciousness, the need for. And five, a TVET, at least one TVET subject. We're not going to be able to apply across the board any of those things. We can't say Spanish for everybody because in one place we might be able to teach Spanish, in another place Portuguese, in yet another place perhaps Hindi, or Swahili. So we're trying very hard to make sure that works out. We're going to roll that out, and you're going to see that very soon. And so the cricket and football ties into how we can do sport and in the country at every school. And so we're trying very hard not to just have the top academic student, but to have a rounded student who's competent, not necessarily wrote an exam and passed it in the instrument, but who's competent and has an appreciation for a little bit of a wider variety of things.
Can you say or comment on the
Right. So
status?
I've lost you again because a call was coming in.
Can you
And
hear
I
now?
think once that happens, they're throwing
you hear?
my audio off with you. So I'm
Can
going
you hear
to
now? Can you hear?
sign
Can you
out
hear?
and come back in.
So much from her. There's so much progress that's happening in our schools. Cricket being introduced back, possibly
excellent, yeah.
football. This is amazing. Our
But
kids.
in our days, football and cricket and
Rounders,
athletics and all
rounders, yeah.
field and track events were very popular in
Yeah.
school.
Right.
I don't know why that
Field and track
yeah,
competition.
track and field competition. It's strange that those things are were no longer. Of course, I
Right.
left Ghana a long
Now,
time.
Kev Samaro says sports is very important in school. Why only cricket and football? Nothing for female students.
Well, the emphasis on sport is the theory that is one of the best form of getting people together, you know.
Absolutely.
Are
And
you-
can you hear us now?
I can. I can.
Yeah, do you care to comment on the state of facilities in school, like laboratory equipment, for
sports
example?
equipment.
I know I've some people have complained about the state of laboratory equipment, even toilet facilities were not up to standard. I don't know if you want to update us on that.
No, I am not, we're not happy with where it is. So we're currently undertaking an exercise which will show us where we need new schools, where we need extensions, and where we need repairs and renovations at every level: nursery, primary, secondary. Unfortunately, and I wish I didn't have to say this. I'd be very pleased, and it would make my life a lot easier if I didn't have to say something like this. The maintenance work done under the APNU was very haphazard. There was no rhyme or reason to it. It was very poorly done. It was not properly. We didn't have a proper plan. So much of what we're seeing now was a regressing of the gains that we had made prior to. You may or may not recall that after they entered office in 2015, there was a commission of inquiry that was commissioned, and from the floor of the house, we were promised a report repeatedly because we asked for it, we demanded it, and nothing came out of that. It was never laid over. No action was taken on it. And the claim was, we're not going to build anything, we're not going to repair anything until we get the findings of this inquiry. So you can imagine, we never got the inquiry. The country never saw that. It was never published. And I think that's responsible for, they were still waiting for this, the findings of that. So we can't throw up our hands and cry. We can't wring our hands in despair. We have to fix it. That requires not only a heavy budget, because that's enormously expensive, but also a plan. Today, someone sent me photographs and a message from a school in Region 3 where the school was being repaired and parents had taken their children back. Understandably so, I probably would do the same thing if I were a parent. Why is the school being repaired now? Because someone complained some 2 or 3 weeks ago that there were needs for repairs. So it's not necessarily only that we can't repair, it is when we do it. We have to be able to capture all our procurement and mobilization, and so the minute school closes in that long July, August holiday, we move into all these schools and fix as many as we can. So you asked me if I care to comment. It's obviously something we need to fix. Now, we also need to know that schools are high traffic places, and if we don't teach our children both at home and in school how to use a toilet um, properly and carefully, you could be changing out a toilet bowl and cistern and crank for every day of the week because it's such high traffic, and the industrial type products come at 10 and 15 times the cost of the ones we're currently buying. So we're going to have to measure which might be best. But there's so much traffic in foot traffic in schools that maintenance is something, and it's not only in Guyana, all over the world. We have to, it's a challenge.
In addition to that, I don't know if you still have a food program going, a lunch
I can't
program,
hear.
a lunch program or some school feeding program. because I raised it up with the vice president, and he said that part of the all money should go towards that, or I don't know if I misinterpreted him, but maybe you can
No,
correct
so the
me.
vice president started a school feeding program under his time, and it was a marvelous success. It continues now. We were actually being funded for it by the World Bank, and then when we became a middle income country, we no longer qualified for that funding. That was sometime around 2008, 2009. And we continued funding that from local funds here in Guyana. What that is every all students in the hinterland get a hot meal, all the way up to nursery and primary, and on the coastland, students get biscuit and juice from all the way up to grade 2, which is the early childhood years. We are about to add to that all students in grade 6. That's what you know as the common entrance class, the last class before you leave primary school, will be getting breakfast come September. And that's the first time the country would have done that. I don't know if you remember the cash grant, the Because We Care cash grant was abolished by the APNU on the ground that they were going to give children breakfast. Unfortunately, there are entire regions that never benefited from that program. Never. Region 2, it never started in Region 2. No child on the East Bank ever got breakfast from that program. 3 schools in Region 6 got breakfast from that program. No child in Region 10 got breakfast from that program. It was poorly done, poorly arranged, poorly rolled out. We are saying come September, every single child from every single region in grade 6 will get breakfast on our breakfast program. And of course, when we start something, the only way we only expand, we don't really stop it. So I can see that becoming grade 5 also. And then the only 2 grades that wouldn't be getting any kind of nutritious supplement would be 3 and 4, and we'll fix that too. But for now, we begin that in September.
One general comment I have is that when I look at education reports, it's only deal with the public sector education. I'm not seeing anything with private sector education. How do you monitor that and take it into consideration in formulating national policies?
So presently, we opened up the environment and the platform for private schools to open, function, flourish in 1992. We have never regulated private schools in the country, so we don't tell them what curriculum they should follow. We don't tell them how much their fee should be. We don't tell them whether they should wear uniforms like we do in the public sector. None of that. And it was designed to allow for more options, both for parents and students. So I don't think we'll be telling anybody how to or what curriculum to follow. We do have to regulate at some point and relatively early um, some of what happens at the private schools. Not curriculum, not fees, not even teachers, but we are giving to the private school students all the benefits of the Because We Care cash grant. This year it's going to be $30,000 for each child. When we give that benefit, we can't give it without being accountable for it. So we need to ask them, which we've begun to do, to tell us who is on your register, name by name, and how many you have, so that when we come to give that benefit, it's not just children being manufactured and so on, because we are accountable for that. To say, though, that the private schools are not incorporated might not be the reality. All private schools are writing, except for the Georgetown International Academy, which we call the American school here. Everybody else is writing the grade 6 exam, and it's our exam set by the Ministry of Education. Well, set by CXC, but it's the Ministry of Education's exam. Most of the secondary schools are writing CSEC, except for one that I know that is doing GC, that's School of the Nation. And of course, the American school is doing the GED and SATs. So there is a relatively good working relationship that I think can be improved, of course. But a good working relationship between the private schools and the public schools. We have never tried, and we won't try to interfere with some of the things parents ask us to talk about. the fees or whether they should wear uniforms or not. That, if you choose to go to a private school, then these are the conditions of that school and you would have to comply with those. If not, we'd be happy to welcome you into the public school. Where there are human rights breaches or anything like that, because the state is the uppermost guardian of every child, and things like human right breaches, we have a constitutional duty to protect against that, and only the state can do that. So we'd step in those circumstances, but generally we leave the private schools, to run themselves how they see fit.
Thank you. Kuli, you want to ask a question?
I haven't, one of the major, this is not primarily only education, but it can be involved, it can be absorbed in the educational program of the school. One of the major problems we have in Guyana is this racial issues. I know the Ministry of Education is the forum in which we can bridge that divide. Sports, as you mentioned, is one way we can do it. Do you have any policy where the Ministry of Education is working in the country so that we can bridge that divide between the racial groups in the country?
I think that's a much larger issue than for the Ministry of Education. Of course, I say that fully conscious that any kind of change would probably best start and best be
Political level.
promoted amongst our young people through our formal education system. Here is what my experience is, though. We are very combative and so on during elections, and a lot of ugly things come out during those periods. And unfortunately, they live with us for a long time. But on the regular day-to-day interactions between student and student, I see the usual problems teenagers encounter when they're interacting, but I don't see the heavy racist flavor in that amongst students. I think it would be naive of us, though, not to say that the adults who engage in that kind of behavior, we have the APNU, AFC, both of them, not and both of them actively and consciously stoking a race card at every turn. It is their only answer to attracting and maintaining sympathies. And it's reckless, it is irresponsible, it is harming persons who they should be looking out for, who see them as leaders. And so I believe the education sector has a role to play, but I think it is not even the primary sector. I think the nation has to, at some point, take a stand and say, we're not going to allow you to engage in this kind of conversation at any place, in any forum, whether political or not. We have, if I were to answer you, directly, we have something called the HFLE, and we have history and social studies and so on, and we actively teach the value of each person, whether they're of a different religion, different ethnicity, geographic location, social class, and so on. It's actively taught that each person has tremendous value, not only to the community and country, but to the world. And we show how, and we show what each ethnicity brought to this land, and what their contributions were and still are, and how we could integrate to make sure we have a better one Guyana that the president speaks of, and so on. So that's actively happening. But I think it would be naive to think that we could teach you something in the classroom for the couple of hours that we have you, and when you get back out there listening to your leaders, whoever they may be, there's a lot of
biases,
hostile, racist language.
Now, I want to touch on a few challenges that you have, like, well, not necessarily the school system, in terms of school dropouts. I don't know what the extent of that, but my understanding is education is compulsory up to secondary in Guyana. Is it? Maybe you can clarify that, but school dropout is a problem in other countries. I don't know what's the extension. And do you still have school welfare officers for each region? If
So
you
we
can
still
comment
have
on that.
school welfare officers in each region, and some, if you Google it, it's in the archives. It's out there on the World Wide Web. Around 2014, we were recognized in the Latin American community for doing the best in stemming. I don't want to say stemming, that wouldn't be accurate, in reducing our number of early school leavers. And that would have been a whole bunch of interventions that caused that over a large number of years. But COVID, I think, has set us back. And I think we have to be very, very careful that we're not complacent in trying to recover the students who should be in classrooms. We're trying to work actively with some NGOs and FBOs, faith-based organizations, to um, give our make sure that the moment a student is absent, we can follow them as though those NGOs and FBOs were social work and welfare officers that you were talking about. Because when you have one welfare officer dealing with a district, it's not nearly enough for what the research has indicated may very well happen with as a result of the long school closures, and it's not enough to um, stem what I believe could be a real problem. So I'm not sure if you were paying attention to us a few weeks ago, maybe about a month and a half ago. We engaged in Operation Recovery, which was to go house to house and try to recover the students who had not turned up for uh, their NGSA mock exams. From then to now, we last week we had mock exam 2, and we saw less students because of that exercise and other interventions. We saw less students being absent, but still enough to cause us alarm. We're also currently examining um, and actively working to get guidance and counseling officers in every school. But again, that'll be 1 or 2 officers to 1,000 children, which is why we want to do the collaboration and relationship with. I had a chat with CIOG already, with having, um, if you live next to a mosque, that the mosque or the church or the temple puts together a team where if a teacher sees his child has been absent for 4 days, on the 5th day they go out and look for the, without excuse, of course. I mean, if a parent calls in to say his child is sick, we understand, but they go out and look for that child and quickly say what we could do to address the underlying cause of the absence. We believe that will be far more effective than just us trying to struggle with that problem alone. Because the other thing too is people in the community know the community and the community members better, and so they might be able to influence their parents more positively than just the bureaucracy of the education ministry.
2 other related issues, I would say, is drug use in school, and if you have a system of counselors attached to each school or each school district,
So we
or
do
how would
have
you be concerned in
welfare
having it?
officers for each district. We're looking to put guidance and counseling officers in each secondary school and some primary schools right now. Unfortunately, I would love to sit here and say we have not encountered any drug use in schools, but that is not the reality. We went back into schools. We've gone back into schools since the 25th of April. And from then to now, I think I have personally dealt um, with about 7 complaints of, it's not yet a month, of either the presence of, the alleged presence of, the usage of different kinds of drugs in schools. And drugs have a range, right? It could be uh, from weed and marijuana to less severe um, psychotropic
My final
substances.
question to you is, how do you compare education accomplishments during your term as opposed to the previous regime?
I didn't hear it, Dr. Tara. What was that?
Um, how would you compare the educational accomplishments that you have had under your tenure compared with the previous regime?
So let me begin by saying I wish I could say that the previous regime was very successful, because if I said that, it wouldn't be their success that I was happy about necessarily. But if they were successful, all our children, our most precious resource, would have gotten service, and for me, that would be worth quite a bit, including my acknowledgement of their success. Unfortunately, and this is what happens when if someone intends to rig an election, that by itself is reprehensible. It is awful. It is taking away your right to vote, your right to choose, your right to all of those things that are very obvious when you're rigging an election. However, the less obvious things that people don't see is the harm that it causes the citizenry that should be served. If a minister of education knows, if a president knows, if a minister of health knows that they don't have to win hearts and souls, and they don't have to encourage people to see them as the best option, if they know they're going to rig an election, they don't have to give service. And that's where the population really suffers, when there are rigged elections, or when there's a plan to rig elections. What we saw, so let's take the 5 months of between the date the regional and general elections were had to the date we were sworn in, and a declaration was made in favor of the People's Progressive Party Civic. In that time, while education officers worked, and they worked without any political direction, any political guidance, in one of the worst periods this country ever had. So we had two crises. We had an election crisis, where everybody was uncertain about what would happen, and we had COVID, when there were no vaccines or anything. And instead of an education minister or the then AP and UAFC government putting in place strategies so that children could learn in the continuation of learning in the absence of face-to-face education, they were trying to hold on to power. And so I hope you understand what I'm saying. If you know you're going to cheat and rig the election, then you don't need to serve. Because that was clearly a plan from very early into the APNU administration. It was very clear that that was the intention. Very little was done to serve people. So they took away the cash grant and they replaced it with nothing. They stopped giving pensioners the subsidy for water and lights. They raised taxes on everything, including the man who rides on a bicycle and sells. They collected more than 60 something billion dollars per year in taxes, which that should tell you how much they raised taxes by. They completely neglected the agricultural sector, so much so that the president himself, Granger, said that rice is a private sector enterprise. We don't have anything to do with that. So all of that came. They took away from the discipline services the bonus that the PPP had historically and traditionally given. All of that came because they didn't need to keep anybody happy. We know that we're going to go to the electorate in a couple of years' time, and we want to be able to stand on podiums and in bottom houses and people's living rooms and say to them, we are the better option, and we're asking for your vote because we have done A, B, C, D. This is how your life has changed. This is how we've made it better for you. And because we know we have to work for that vote, we have to serve now. And I think that alone, those two comparisons will very clearly demonstrate, where work is happening and where it wasn't happening. Like I said, it gives me no pleasure to say that, because in the time that there was no service, it was children and their parents that suffered, and some of that suffering is not going to be reversible, and that is unfortunate.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Kobe would like to ask you the final question, and then we pass on to Shamiza.
Ms. Manickchand, could you like to tell us the ministry policy with students with disabilities?
Right. So students with disabilities, our overarching policy is that we must be inclusive, and that as far as we can, the students with disabilities must be treated specially, but not separately. This is one of the areas we promised in our manifesto to have a special look at, and you will see that being rolled out shortly. And we're looking to train more special needs teachers. Right now, there are teachers addressing special needs children, but they're not specially trained for that. We're looking to we have a center here in Guyana that was intended. It's Cuban supported and initiated, and it was intended to be the center for the entire Caribbean, and that has not taken off. That you will see changing shortly. So special needs children, as far as we can, they have to be integrated into the classrooms. And I say as far as we can because we also understand that that's not going to be possible with every special needs child. It is one of the areas that we promised will receive attention, and it's one of the areas we're jumping off on shortly.
What about students with serious disability? Do they have like assistant teachers to work along with them on a
Not
one-to-one
right now, not
basis?
in every place. We passed the Disability Act in or around the early 2000s. And one of the requirements is that any new building that is built has to have facilities to allow for disabled students. And as far as we can, we're making sure that happens in schools and so on. But like I said, this is one of the areas that um, requires and is waiting for heavy governmental input.
All right, thank you. Honorable Minister, we thank you very much for this interactive session. And now we have our host, Shamisa, will make the concluding remarks.
All right, Minister Manickchand, before we go, I do want to ask, there was a recent announcement about teachers possibly having to report to duty during the summer. Is that a mandatory or optional thing that was announced?
No, it wasn't an announcement. It was a question about how we were going to recover learning loss that had occurred over the 2 years of school closure. If you recall, we closed schools in March of 2020 because of the PNC's wayward behavior. A lot of people actually stopped their children from going to school the day before the election. Well, the Friday before the Monday's election. So that would have been even before we closed for COVID. And then we didn't open schools fully until the 25th of April, 2022. So that was longer than 2 years. How would we recover learning loss? And so it was a question that was asked of me. And I gave a list of things that we could possibly do, including have an extended school term or an early beginning. And so it's still a conversation we're having. We have to wait and see whether it makes sense. Of course, it wouldn't be for everyone because that's also a question parents are asking. Well, I want to make plans for my holidays. We haven't gone away for 2 years. I usually send my children into the interior. What do we do? It will not be, even assuming we have extended classroom time, it will not be for everyone. It's going to be for students who need that special attention. And we have to hear from our teachers. Some teachers are saying to me very clearly, I cannot do this. I am tired. And some teachers are saying, I can't imagine not doing it because I can't think of what we will return to school with in September if we don't push in this extra time. So that's something we have to take into consideration too.
Perfect. Well, tonight we heard many things being said by our minister. She spoke of, the budget, what it's allocated for, and what the plans are for her budget that was implemented for education. The use of technology to educate our students, but more importantly, the fact that we are giving our kids sports in this, we're reintroducing sports back into the school. That makes me happy. I was always one that played sports in school, so I'm happy to hear that. And hot lunches in school sounds terrific. Dr. Tara, do you think it will be like rice, dal? It would be nice to know what we will have in place for hot lunches. But with that said, I heard some really amazing things tonight, and I'm happy to see where our students, where our teachers, where our education is really heading. And your final comments for tonight?
I want to thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I recall I believe, 2014, when you were Minister of Education, we had asked you to support a program that we did among the high schools in quarantine, 7 high schools and 7 high schools in Eskimo, to do a workshop on suicide. You supported wholeheartedly. We would like to do a follow-up study of that, if you will facilitate it too.
Absolutely. It was a very useful study.
Thank you very much. You have always been accommodating to our requests, I must say. And we want to thank you from the bottom of our heart. I myself started my career in your village, Moore Point CM School. So we want to thank you, and we want to thank our host, Shamisa Ali, and her husband, who's a technical guy in the background. We want to thank them as well. And you make the announcement for our program.
Well, we do have a program coming up. It will be a meet and greet with our president.
No, they won't be here, but we'll be doing a program in honor of the 56th independence anniversary of Guyana.
And it is actually Saturday, May 28th, 2022, 3 to 5:30 p.m. at the Hindu community. The Tulsi Mandir. It will be at the Tulsi Mandir right here in Queens, New York.
111th Street.
We don't know yet who will be the government representative.
Okay. So it will be one of those, it will either be our president or vice president or our prime minister. So please make every effort to be there. And with that said, Minister Manickchand, it was truly an honor to have you here this evening. Very important things that you had to say, and very important plans.
Thank you very much for having me.
Education. So thank you so much.
And we have to invite you back again to come on this program at a later time.
Of course. Of course.
Thank you, and all the best.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments.